Good for now.
If it happens, it happens. All right, firing up, footballers. We are live here, coming at you from Chicago with Guillermo Rivera of The Athletic on the line. I also got Jeffrey on the line because he couldn't be here with us today. But
Skyping in.
We got everybody Skyping in, so hello. Sorry for the long wait. Sorry for the little delays there. So, you know how these things are. But here we are.
My fault.
So, fire it up, footballers. Hopefully you guys can tell us about audio as things go along. Looks like we got people joining us. People could let us know about audio as we go along if there's ever an issue with audio. Hello, we got Jiggly, first in the stream. Sorry for the wait, everybody. We'll let everybody kind of file in here. We got a little script of things to go off of, and of course all you guys had questions. Hello, hello, hello. I don't know if you guys could see the chat. Jeff or Guillermo?
I got it. I got it. James, all right, let's get rolling here, James. Where are we starting?
You got the script there. So Guillermo.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic to have you on the podcast, man. It is a. By the way, everybody, if you could smash that like button for having Guillermo taking the time to come on the podcast and answer everybody's questions and talk about the fire, please do so now or later, whatever the heck is clever. I'm always weird about that. Jeffrey, and so Jeffrey and I were so happy to have you on. We were just wondering, how did you start covering the fire?
This is my 10th season covering the fire. Just kind of a little bit of a background short history lesson on Fire Confidential and just to get to your answer here. Back in 2007, 2006, this Tribune had a guy named Luis Arroyave working for them as a sports writer, and he was the fire beat writer. I think he was the last full-time fire beat writer that was dedicated to one of the major newspapers. Luis was writing fire pieces regularly at the Tribune, and he also was maintaining a blog called The Red Card, which was very popular back in that time frame because it was one of the very few outlets that provided full-time fire coverage in a way that I think you're used to seeing sports teams covered, across the other major sports in Chicago, and it was refreshing to see somebody giving that much attention and respect to soccer and the fire.
What happened to him?
Luis, in 2007, 2008, I believe, stepped away from the sports writing gig to pursue a gig as the entertainment writer for the Tribune.
Oh.
When Luis stepped away, the Tribune decided that they weren't going to pursue soccer on a full-time basis anymore. At least they weren't going to have a full-time beat writer. So they essentially discontinued the Red Card blog. The Red Card blog was alive and on life support for a while. But right around that same time, the Tribune Company was just starting up the Chicago Now blogging website. Sam Stachel, who's now the MLSsoccer.com, one of the national writers, was the original writer for Fire Confidential, who essentially took over the fire beat for Luis Arroyave.
Oh, wow. I've been talking with Sam. We might be coming on the podcast here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah.
But Sam did Fire Confidential for 2 years and then left that to work for MajorLeagueSoccer.com on the fire beat. When Sam left following the 2009 season, I stepped in and started writing it. And I think my major thinking behind it at that point was I didn't want the fire coverage to go away. At least I didn't want it to go away from an independent voice that wasn't out of the main office. MLSsoccer.com has at that point was bringing on new writers and bringing on guys to cover teams all across the country. But I didn't want Fire Confidential to die away, and wanted to at least maintain an independent voice and kind of give people an avenue, or at least a platform for fire information, whether it was anything you would see typically just about anywhere else for every other sport, whether it be player news, news about uniforms, news about fans, anything across the board that was fire related. So 2010, I started writing Fire Confidential, and that has led to this.
Oh, wow.
All right, that's awesome. How do you balance your work with the Athletic and Fire Confidential? Do you still try to do both avenues?
Yeah, well, the majority of my writing, 99.9% of it, has been at the Athletic now. I joined the Athletic, I think, 2 years ago, and I was the first soccer writer for the Athletic. They were obviously covering the other sports. I'd like to find out if there was a market for soccer. I guess they found out there was. I didn't leave Fire Confidential completely. Obviously, we still do game day items. We still do photo threads, and Marty still does match previews for Fire Confidential. But the majority of my stuff, I'm still basically editing Fire Confidential, but the majority of my stuff is at the Athletic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why Jeffrey and I subscribed to the Athletic. When you made that move over there, we were like, what was it, $5 a month or something to get you, in addition to like what else they had, which was actually kind of slim pickings at the time, and right now it's blossomed into something huge and really awesome. There's so many great articles. If you're a sports fan, I highly recommend checking out The Athletic, getting a subscription to that. That's what Guillermo writes for. Also, we had Marty on the podcast last week. Guillermo was just referencing him. Marty writes for Fire Confidential as well and does this preview. So that's awesome. And we look forward to having him again on the podcast. But so Guillermo, when it comes to the I had a question about just being at the Fire games, like these press conferences. Do you get to go to those with do you have a press pass? How does that work?
Yeah, you've got a press pass to get into press conferences. It's exactly what you would think it is. It's the media shuttles down to from the press box to the conference room that's right behind the bench and on the way to the players' locker room. We all file in, and after the game, 10 minutes or so, Panovich or the opposing team coach will come in and get to ask a few questions, and after that, they shuttle us into the locker room to talk to the players there. So it's pretty much exactly what you see.
Is this your busiest time of the year, the preseason? I guess my question is, when are you at your busiest with your reporting during the year?
Preseason, the busiest time of the year is during the season, when there are games and there are actual stories, when there are, there are more things to talk about rather than just training and transfer rumors and what have you. The MLS offseason has evolved into something that's similar to the other sports in that it's always busy. There's always either a draft season going on or transfer rumors to address. Obviously, transfer rumors generate a lot of interest, a lot of buzz, a lot of talk. So yeah, I think to get that to the point where it is like in other sports, or at least the volume of talk about transfers or trades, is a good thing. Whether or not they're just rumors or items that are floating out there, having people talk about the sport or talking about your league and talking about your team throughout the course of the year, including the off season, is a good thing. So I think you're starting to see that pick up with the transfer windows and the almost endless MLS draft season that leads into preseason. You're starting to see that get busier now, but the regular season is definitely the busiest time of the year as far as what I write anyway, because I have guys like Sam and Paul who write. Sam, who writes for MLSsoccer.com, Paul Tenorio, who writes for The Athletic. Those guys are covering the league, so they've got a ton of work to do. I'm just focused on the Fire for the most part. I watch the rest of the league. I pay attention to the rest of the league, but the majority of my writing is Chicago focused.
Speaking of which, you kind of focus on the Fire. What is your favorite other team, if you have one?
I don't really have another team that I follow as closely as the Fire. I watch. I used to watch a lot more of it. Having little kids kind of
changes things.
Some of that time, but I don't really have a favorite team, so to speak.
We have a question here on the chat. Do they, Nelson Rodriguez, dictate what questions are asked and by who? A question by Margaret there, Guillermo.
They do not. I can't speak for everyone, but I have never had anyone from the Fire come up and tell us that we cannot ask a question in the press conference. And actually, there was only one instance where they shed reporters away from asking about the fan absence in the stands last year. That was really the only time that they wanted, that they've asked, or they've never said, okay, we want you to ask these questions. Don't ask these questions, other than let's keep away from the fan issue and just talk about the games.
So, but they're not really telling you what to write about, but maybe you kind of have a sense of what to write about. Do you actually have to worry about maybe the Fire threatening to take away media credentials?
I've never had a situation where they've told me you need to write about this or you want to write about that. I've had conversations with different people throughout the years that where they've indicated their unhappiness with something I've written. But I think if you write objectively and write fairly, you're not going to run into a situation where, like you say, and I know a lot of people like to speculate a lot about a lot of things, but from my end, I'm not worried about any of that stuff.
Guillermo, I just want to throw you some praise. Your writing is fantastic. I just got to say that when I read your writing, I dabbled in writing myself a little bit, just like for some other outlets like Hot Time in Old Town and some other outlets, something that Jiggly writes for over in MLS Multiplex. And when I read your writing, I'm like, I'm like, wow, this guy has far many tiers above me. It's ridiculous, and it's awesome to read your stuff. And Jiggly had this thought here. Not Jiggly. Slow had. What are your thoughts about other press outlets like Hot Time or MLS Multiplex or those other ones?
Well, I know where they're coming from because it's fan-based writing. So I never didn't consider myself a professional writer coming into it. I've always written different things and was always fairly good at putting together a sentence. So, I've written different things in the past that were not sports related. So, writing writing about the Fire was sort of not a difficult transition for me, but it's not as simple as it seems. You have to appreciate what Hot Time does and what all the other outlets do.
I have a question here for you, Guillermo. With the Chicago Fire, with a lot of our fan base, let's just say they're agitated right now. Do you feel like when you go into these press conferences that you have to ask some questions that, the fans would ask? I hope that question makes sense. Do you feel like when you go into a press conference or you write an article that you are trying to, represent what the fans are thinking at the time?
Yeah, that's one of the angles that I wanted to take in actually starting Fire Confidential. I wanted to treat it as sort of sports radio in writing because Fire Conversation didn't exist and still doesn't exist really on a consistent basis as far as immediate interaction with between media, the team, and the fan base. You still have your blogs, you've got Twitter now where you can provide live real-time interaction, but there's no real outlet like the Score for Bears fans or Cubs fans or White Sox fans. So soccer fans are still pretty much restricted to the internet in terms of real time talking about the game, and that's kind of what I wanted to provide. Kind of wanted to give fans a place where they could go to get some of that, even if it wasn't a call-in show or something in that nature.
That's kind of why we started the show originally, and then we've evolved now into a live stream where we're taking these live questions, and finally we feel like we're getting some conversation. That's kind of the reason why we started, because nobody does talk about this stuff. I have a million questions here that I gotta get back to. Actually, I didn't finish the question from Slow Days. He asked what about the thoughts about press outlets losing their press pass?
From my point of view, I think MLS needs all of the coverage they can get. The Fire obviously have languished in terms of mainstream press coverage. So you want to be professional and you want to do things correctly. I can see where teams would want to ensure that they're not bringing in. You don't want to go in and how do I phrase this correctly? You don't want to go in and ask, hey, why don't you fire this guy, or hey, you guys suck. That's not the kind of thing that you want.
Some sort of tact is involved.
Yeah, it's you have to keep some tact in dealing with in professional organizations. At some point, these are it's entertainment for fans, but it's a livelihood for these guys. So
that's true.
There has to be some sort of a medium between the two.
That makes sense. I got another one. How do the players feel about the fan problems? Are they, because it doesn't seem like they're really able to indicate it, but I don't know if you get any hints behind the doors. Have they said anything personally off? Well, here's the thing. The person asks, have they said anything personally off the record? If it's off the record, Guillermo really can't comment about that stuff. But
you are correct. Some players.
That's how you keep that trust.
Yeah, the players know what's going on. Some of them aren't. They're kind of miffed by it, but their main job is to play. Mm-hmm. So that's where their focus is.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Did anyone else assume Guillermo had an accent, or that was just me? Says Brandon Rafferty.
I have a question here for you, Guillermo. What stadium is your favorite to go to in the MLS?
Portland.
Okay.
Portland's fantastic. It's a great time in Portland.
I heard they're changing their stadium.
Yeah, they've gone through revisions, upgrades, and I think they've expanded capacity. I think, unfortunately, the Fire's game this year is on a weekday. But if there's one place that I would suggest getting to, it's Portland.
Oh, that sounds like a blast. That'd be a fun game. Jiggly says we never ask him about himself. Margaret says she knows all she needs to know about Jiggly. But Jiggly also comments, Nelson has commented that he is never off the record. I don't know if that's actually true, but that would be funny. Marco Batista with a question. Any chance we see a post-game live stream or Twitter or other social media platform this season? From us, we usually do like post-games and stuff, but not on Twitter. We'll usually just do it on this YouTube. Pretty much this is our only outlet. I don't know about Guillermo, though.
That's something that I've kind of dabbled in the past, and it's possible for this coming season. But there's some details I have to work through there that I have to figure out how that would work. But it's a thought.
I imagine you already got deadlines that you got to deal with, so I mean that's like another thing to kind of like toss on there.
Yeah, well, the Athletic is pretty flexible with deadlines as far as what I ran on the Fire, so. Mm-hmm. I don't always have set deadlines like some of the papers do, like Tribune or Daily Herald. Some of those guys might have, or MLSsoccer.com might have. I have a pretty flexible platform for what I write when I write it.
Guillermo, have you watched? None of the preseason has been on live stream or on video.
And they canceled the game.
To look at how the Chicago Fire have looked this preseason thus far?
I haven't seen anything other than the short videos that I think you guys have probably seen. I haven't seen much of the game other than the first game, other than that little highlight package. So yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of it yet.
A couple last questions before we really get into it here. How does a journalist get wind of transfers ahead of time?
Well, there are a couple of ways. You establish over the course of time relationships with people that you trust and people that trust you. So whether or not you reach out and either just ask, hey, do you got anything? You ever hear anything going on? Or sometimes the people that you trust will reach out to you and say, hey, I've got something for you. It's a little bit of both, but it's all based on trust with whatever source you might have, and that source is trust in you.
Oh, okay. Dago wants to get into business. So everybody, if you could smash that like button for Spitting Fire and Guillermo taking the time to come on the show, smash that like button for us, just to let us know that we're doing some good work over here. And let's dig into this. Dago Camacho with the first question here that he wants to get into. He's saying, what impact do you think Joe Mansueto will have for the Fire? Do you foresee him taking over the club sometime soon? I know Marty actually mentioned that there is a clause in the contract that should activate or something like that.
Well, I think you're starting to see Mansueto's influence now on the field and off the field. You saw the Fire on the Mile store, which was essentially Mansueto's brainchild because he owns the building, and thought, hey, let's put a Fire store on the Mag Mile. I think he's brought an influx of cash that you'll start to see more benefit to the club over the next however many months that it will take to start implementing some of this stuff. And you just mentioned the clause. When you go into a partnership, business partnership, there is almost always a clause of that nature. I think the clause that you're referring to here.
Is he around, Guillermo? Is he in Toyota Park?
Oh, yeah.
Is he in the building?
He's around. Yeah, I don't know that he's in Toyota Park or SeatGeek Stadium.
SeatGeek, I'm sorry.
Have you tried to get an interview with him?
I have tried, and I have not spoken to him.
Do you think he'll become more and more accessible or more visual throughout the next, maybe few seasons?
I would hope so. I mean, if Andrew Hoffman's not going to be available and no one above Nelson's going to speak to the media, I would hope that one of the two owners would make themselves available to speak to their fan base at some point. The option that you mentioned is controlled by Andel, so it's not as if he can just say, I'm going to buy out Andel and take over the team. So I would hope that he becomes available at some point. No one has spoken to him since the announcement was made that he was buying 49% of the club, which is odd.
But we could assume that he is paying attention.
Oh, he's paying attention, yes.
Well, I heard he was at the Mag Mile with his family, so it's nice that he was there meeting some fans.
And Andrew Hoffman pays attention. I know people think that he is not interested or not invested in the club, but he does pay attention.
That's good to hear. SA has a question here, but let's get into. But right before we get into that, ESPN and the Fire, the TV deal. That went down last year. It seems like DC United is going through something similar this year. What did you think about that?
For soccer fans who were going to buy that package regardless, it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for $5 a month, you get a ton of soccer.
Absolutely.
You get a ton of soccer all year. You get all the rest of you get the rest of the league. You get leagues across the globe and you get soccer pretty much whenever you want. So for $5 a month, it's fantastic.
That is true.
Where it falls short is that you lose the visibility in the market that you really can't afford to lose. I mean, I can't tell you how many times last year either a family member or a friend who knows that I do fire-related stuff asked, why aren't the Fire on TV anymore? Are they not playing? No, they're on an internet streaming service now. So I think they've sort of cornered themselves into that hardcore soccer fan market, and I think at some point they'll have to revisit it if it continues on this way. It's great for soccer fans. It's not easily accessible for your casual fan or people that you may not typically reach, who aren't looking for soccer on ESPN Plus. Cubs fans, Sox fans were bound to run into it on CSN, so there was visibility from that end. But
was that the high watermark? Was CSN the high watermark for their TV deal?
In terms of visibility, yeah, I can't think of anything that's currently on air that would be more of a fit than CSN. But I know the thought is that a relationship with ESPN, who's a self-proclaimed worldwide leader in sports, would lead fans of other sports to stumble on MLS or stumble on the Fire. But that to me is would have been more likely down the road with the league a little bit more established. The Fire, at least, let's just say they were coming off a successful decade rather than a unsuccessful decade. I think that might have been an easier pill to swallow for fans who.
Will the local, the Bulls, the Blackhawks, and the Cubs, with them getting their own local TV network or channel, whatever it is, how is that going to affect the Fire's market, or will it at all?
I don't know. It's yet to be seen. I know the Cubs are going to go off and do their own thing, and CSN is going to be left to Reinsdorf's teams and the Blackhawks. So,
well, if they got Manny Machado, they might have something.
Yeah.
And what about the Bulls? If the Bulls get Zion Williamson, there's another draw.
Nobody's watching the Bulls.
No one's watching the Bulls. Jamesy, we got some more questions.
We got loads of questions. Before we get into them, I was curious about radio, about why there's no English radio for the Fire. There is Spanish radio on 1200 AM. I don't know if that's continuing. What's going on? Do you know anything about either of those?
I would imagine they'll be back on Spanish radio. English radio has been it's something that we've been talking about for the last decade. It would seem that that would be an avenue in which to at least generate a little bit more visibility, a little bit more interest. But it's a hard sell because the market is saturated with sports here in Chicago. So the reason that they haven't come on to English radio is that the sports radio stations here, the Score in particular, doesn't think there's a market for it.
Right. It definitely seems that way. We got a whole bunch of questions from people that we got to get into. You're right, Jeffrey. From SAI, any idea or insight behind the trial list from Atletico B? When will they release the full preseason squad list?
The trial list, I think you're referring to Antonio Rodriguez, is not from Atletico B. He's a guest player. I'm not sure that we'll see a full trial list or full roster release until they get back from Spain and get into training in South Carolina. There's a German guest player out there right now, but they're guest players. I don't think they've been labeled as out-and-out trialists yet. So I think until they get back into the States, I don't think you're going to see a full updated trialist roster.
Any chance that's Philip Lahm coming out of retirement?
Yeah, right.
It's not Philip Lahm.
What do you think is the biggest issue that needs to be addressed in the Fire organization?
Getting the first team back on track to a point where they can start to generate some interest and start to bring fans back to SeatGeek. It's still strange to say SeatGeek.
SeatGeek.
But yeah, the first order of business has to be getting the first team back into some semblance of a consistent winner. There's a lot off the field that still needs to be addressed. They've got to be more visible in the market. They've got to get the academy to the point where it's producing more players. They've got to address their USL. They've got to address their training facility at some point. So, but first and foremost, they've got to get the first team back into a place where they are at least consistently respectable.
Well, I had the question tabbed later, but you kind of asked. You're talking about it right now. Do you foresee a future for the Fire in Bridgeview, or do you see them jettisoning out maybe out to Chicago?
I think for the foreseeable future, they're in Bridgeview. There's a possibility that at some point something happens where they may be able to buy their way out of that lease and they can get into Soldier Field until they find a permanent home in Chicago. But I think for now, at least the immediate foreseeable future, they're in Bridgeview. I believe that there will be a presence in Chicago in the form of a training facility at some point in the near future, but for right now, it's Bridgeview.
Do you think that the Heineken 44 pitch is an adequate training facility?
Not for the first team, no.
Sorry, Jeffrey, to cut you off.
I think it's interesting. You look at what Northwestern has done and DePaul has done downtown, adding brand new facilities, and now they're more visible. And think about DePaul moved back into the city after being in All-State Arena.
Mm-hmm.
But my question to you, Guillermo, is do you think you alluded to earlier, Chicago being a saturated sports market, is it as simple as, build a winning team and they will come, or do they need that Polish international? Do they need a Mexican international to draw a crowd here?
I mean, those guys will help. Blanco helped. Peter Novak helped. I mean, but those were good teams.
Mm-hmm.
Those were winning teams, and those were teams that drew interest. That's really the key. I think, and Nelson's mentioned in the past that he may be more concerned with finding good players than Mexican players or Polish players per se, and that's probably the right the way to look at it. I don't know that you want to just say we need to go out and get a Mexican player, but they have to address getting the first team at least back on good footing, because they haven't been there for a while.
What about the fan experience, Guillermo? I mean, I was watching the Super Bowl, and you see this Atlanta stadium is just beautiful, and you see what Minnesota's building.
Affordable concessions.
It's just how do you feel about the fan experience as a Chicago Fire fan? I mean, it doesn't seem like that wow factor is there that a lot of these newer clubs are bringing in.
No, but again, these newer clubs have that advantage of being a newer club.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Atlanta's 2 years into it, and obviously they've done everything right so far. But they've got a big, beautiful stadium and the advantage of an owner who's willing to spend just about anything to make them a top flight team in the league. So, yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at the new teams and say, hey, why can't we do that? But, you look at some of these teams that are part of that original crew, and the Fire weren't part of the 96 league when they started up, but that crop of the first 10 teams in the league, some of them have struggled. You look at the Revolution, who have struggled for a whole variety of reasons. Colorado's and Houston's. Houston used to be San Jose, which is now Houston. But look at the teams that are part of that original core, and some of the original batch of soccer-specific stadiums.
Miami Fusion.
Yeah, Miami Fusion. You look at, for example, the White Sox in Comiskey Park.
Yep.
They have trouble drawing, and they have trouble really getting people attached to that park.
But they have the best deal in the city of Chicago, apparently, because like city of Chicago is basically paying for the stadium. They get it for dirt cheap, so they could kind of afford to run at a loss. But I don't know if the Fire are in that position.
No, they're not. But but even Comiskey Park, it was one of the cookie cutter stadiums before everybody got into the retro baseball stadiums that people seem to have loved over the last 30 years or so. And the same thing kind of happened with Toyota Park and Bridgeview. Bridgeview was the only offer at the time. They weren't going to get anywhere near the deal they got in the city of Chicago. The city didn't want soccer at the time in the city, so there was no interest. They went to Bridgeview. The MLS was pushing for everyone to get soccer-specific stadiums, or at least in the pipeline. Bridgeview came up with an offer where they said, we'll build it for you. And that was the only real offer they had, so they took it.
And now you got teams like New York and Atlanta playing. New York playing in a baseball field. New York NYCFC. I think they want to get out of there. And Atlanta playing in a football field. But speaking about Atlanta, they just sold Almiron for $26 million to Newcastle, and their coach Tata Martinez is now the coach of Mexico. And they brought in Frank de Boer. Do you have any expectations for them, the champions?
That's still a good team, and we haven't seen what they look like with de Boer. You're going obviously from Martino to possibly a different style of play. They won't have Almiron, but they'll have Martinez.
I believe he was the coach of Ajax for a while too, of the Ajax youth setup.
Yeah. You're getting a different, possibly completely different style of play from de Boer.
So. Both had Barcelona in their backgrounds, though.
You still need players, and most of that team is still there, so they're still going to be good.
Any thoughts about Pity Martinez?
I don't want to say he'll make people forget about Almiron, but that is a guy who will still be a force in MLS. He's going to be a player in MLS.
Joseph Martinez signing that 5-year deal. I thought that was really impressive of them to do. What did you think about that?
Yeah, it's surprising that, and obviously they can still sell them, but that's sort of, you're starting to see the tired sort of refrain about MLS being a retirement league and the old guys go there for an old payday. You're starting to see some of that really start to be an irrelevant discussion with guys like Joseph Martinez sticking around and bringing in PT, some of the other players. Now I think this is one of the topics you want to talk about, the MLS now sort of being a selling league, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
It seems like we may have seen the evolution of MLS 3.0 to 4.0 in this last transfer window, with selling players for $26 million, Pulisic going for $70 million.
Luciano Acosta, right? That rumor was out there.
And with what was it? Ex-Fire player Harrison was picked up for $5 million from Man City. What was it? Polsters with Celtic, Gutman. We'll get into that, but Alphonso Davies with Bayern for a $12 million or something like that. So I mean, like MLS is certainly entering a new world.
Yeah, and it's not a bad world to enter. Being a selling league is not a bad thing. It now allows you to put more resources into the league, put more resources into your team, and it starts to draw more respect to the players who are playing in your league. And you see somebody like Almiron sell for $26 million. You might stumble into looking at someone else you want to buy while you're looking at Almiron. So again, it adds to visibility, it adds to credibility. It's another step up in the evolution of the league. I think you'll start to see more of that, hopefully.
Do you think we'll see a fourth DP?
Doesn't sound like it. The CBA negotiations are going to be interesting because there's a whole host of messy items that the players' union really needs to stand by this time. Now that the league is starting to make a turn in finances and sponsors and selling players and spending money. So yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a fourth DP. There was some talk this past winter about actually getting rid of a DP. I would like to see all of the ridiculous TAM rules go away and just go with a sort of a soft cap that will weed out some of the owners who don't want to spend the money and will have to get out. But yeah, the players' union really needs to stand by all of their issues this coming winter.
Going back to our chat here, have you heard anything about the Fire in the academy? People have been saying Fire are wanting to close their academy to save money.
Yeah, and the way I've heard that described is more of a restructuring of the academy. I don't know that it would go away completely. I think there's been some thought about looking at different ways to monetize the academy, and that's something I'll cover somewhere down the line. But yeah, I think there's a group of owners in MLS who don't want to put as much money into their academies as some of the other clubs do, and that's another issue that really needs to be addressed between the league, the owners, the players. It's something that has to be addressed.
So what happened to the Martin Ojeda deal? Would think we'd still be able to fit him into the team, says SAI.
Martin Ojeda was a guy that they had interest in. I think that went away as they got closer to landing Frankowski. There were some numbers floated out there, and that I've been told were inaccurate. There was some thought about the Fire not pursuing Ojeda because of an international spot shortage, which was not true. I think he's a player that they legitimately looked at, but I think they probably felt that Frankowski was a better option for him.
This, I think you kind of talked about this earlier. It says NR and Pano aside, why aren't Hotman and Mansueto involved in the media roundtable discussions more often?
I don't know. I would love that to be the case.
There was a rumor about mid-season last year that was brought back up again recently. Said something about Jiggly, blah, blah, blah. That was a while ago. I'm sorry, Jigs. What is next?
I got one here, James.
Okay.
I got one here. Other than Georgie, who do you think one of the most promising youth players? Other than Georgie, who do you think the most promising players are? Sorry, Donald.
On the Fire Academy?
Yeah, I guess in general. Could be Campos, any of those young players. Who do you think is the next young up-and-coming star on the Fire, if there is one? If it's Georgie, even.
Yeah, well, Georgie's obviously it's easy for people to start overhyping him and sort of oversell Georgie. He's a good player. He still needs to get better. I think he's going to be forced into that number 10 spot because they don't have a number 10. But I still don't see him as your prototypical number 10. When I say number 10, I think of somebody who's playing behind the striker in front of the midfielders and who's creating and taking defenders on off the dribble, spraying passes across the field and setting up attackers for chances. I don't think he's that type of player. He's more of a type of guy who will be successful in the flow of the game. I think the way that Berhalter is using him with the U.S. national team in those two games as a sort of dual number 10, as he described it, is probably where he's going to succeed. I think he came up through the academy playing more as a central attacker or a box-to-box midfielder. I think that's where he's best. But I think he can play as a 10 in a system. I don't know that you can expect him to sit in the middle of the field and run your offense for you.
Do you have any other info on Georgie, like about his bio, his background, his previous coach, Larry Sunderland?
Yeah, well, he came up through the Fire Academy. I think he joined the academy in 2013, so he came up through the previous academy regime. I know Paunovic played a big part in the Fire making the decision to bring him up into the first team as a homegrown rather than go to North Carolina where he had committed to. I think Pano showed some commitment to him and really thought that he could come along with the first team, and that sort of convinced him to forego college and come to the Fire. So I believe he came up through his dad's soccer academy up in the Northwestburg, but he's been in the Fire organization since 2013, 2014, I believe.
His dad's a soccer coach?
Any other young up-and-coming academy players? Like, what's the name, James, you always saw there? Damian Loss or something?
Damian Loss is the guy I was just going to mention. At some point, he'll be a homegrown.
For sure? He's not going to leave us like the rest do?
They'll make an offer, but I don't know. I can't say that he'll make an offer.
We're scarred.
Any more chances for some U.S. men's national team caps for Georgie?
I think he'll definitely be considered for the Gold Cup.
That's awesome.
Based on what he's done in this January camp, I think he'll definitely get some consideration.
Do you think he's going to be sold soon to Europe?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think eventually he would like to play in Europe, for everything I've heard, and that's his ultimate goal. And I think that's probably the ultimate goal of just about every kid who's coming up through the academy system and through high schools. And you want to play with the best, and you want to play against the best. So I don't think that anybody should begrudge a player for wanting to play in Europe. I've heard rumblings that there are going to be some opportunities and some interest already. So
for who? Can you repeat that, Guillermo? We lost you for a second there.
What's that?
Can you repeat that name? We lost you for a second there.
Yeah, that's Georgie. I've heard that there have been teams interested already, and he's got interest in at some point playing at a higher level. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's 20 years old. He's got 2 caps under his belt, and he was hurt for a year. So he still has some growing to do, and he still has to perform on the field in order to get that interest into an offer. But if he continues to develop, I would suspect that at some point, if it's not this summer, that next winter he will have European interest somewhere.
Speaking of people leaving, Fire players leaving for Europe, Gutman and Polster. Polster go over to Rangers and Gutman over to Celtics. Any information about what happened and went down there?
Well, they tried to keep Polster,
mm-hmm.
But and again, you can't fault players for wanting to play in some of the European leagues. I don't know that the Scottish Premier League is any better in quality than MLS, and from what I've seen, I don't think it is. But there are Celtic and Rangers are 2 teams that, if you're going to play in the Scottish Premier League, those are the 2 you're going to want to play at. So we'll see. Polster's got, I think, a 2.5-year deal there, so he's going to have a chance to play, and Gerard seems to like him, so we'll see. Again, you can't begrudge players for taking a shot. He took a shot, and we'll see how it goes for him. Gutman, there is a bit of a backstory there, and some of that's come out over the weekend. I think The Athletic is working on a more detailed Gutman story, so I will tease that, and I'll
subscribe to The Athletic, people.
I have a question for you here, Guillermo. I want to talk about Pano a little bit. Do you think Pano can become a premier coach in the MLS?
I think Pano has made some strides from his first year. You're always going to have issues. The fans are always going to have issues with coaches as far as team selection, lineup, tactics. But again, you need players to make that happen. The first year he was here, I don't know that there's a whole lot that can be learned from that first year. The second year,
I'll be right back, boys.
Obviously better with Bastian Schweinsteiger and McCarty. The one thing I think he needs to improve on, and you saw some of that improvement last year, was man management. I think Paunovic can be a successful coach in MLS, but again, you got to have players. I think there's one thing that if there was a criticism is that the Fire don't really have a style or established way that they play. Over 3 years, they're still mixing and matching and trying to figure out exactly who they are. That some of the older players that they've gotten as part of their core now, with Nikolic, Schweinsteiger, McCarty, are quality pieces without a real set system.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Guillermo, how do you feel about him playing Brandon Vincent at center back, playing Schweinsteiger at center back, and not giving times to guys like Grant Lillard, Campbell, kind of playing people out of position and almost stunting their development a little bit?
Yeah, I mean that's valid criticism. Like Brandon Vincent, obviously not a center back. Grant Lillard, I think they just kind of lost confidence in Grant Lillard. He also had some injuries last year, which kept him off the field. So, whether or not you think Jonathan Campbell is a starting MLS center back, I think at some point he should have played more than he did last year. But those are decisions that are valid. That are valid criticisms. Bastian Schweinsteiger essentially forced himself into the back line because the back line was so bad. So
how does that dynamic work? What is that relationship between Paunovic and Schweinsteiger?
It seems like the relationship is pretty good. I mean, it's Bastian Schweinsteiger. So you
can call some shots.
Yeah, you can call some. You've got one of the best midfielders in the world over the last 2 decades for the most part. So if he says he wants to drop back and play center back, then that's what happens when you don't have center backs. But
do you think he's going to play center back this season? Even because he said it.
Not. Yeah, I would certainly hope not. Like I said, you've got one of the best midfielders in the world over the last 20 years. I know he's getting older, and he's got some miles on his legs, and he's not quite as agile as he once was. But the reality is he's just not that good of a center back.
We got a zillion questions from people we got to catch up on. But real quick, Giovinco sold. What happened?
It seems like he wanted more money, and Toronto wasn't looking to give him more money in extension, so they sold him.
Do you think that's going to be devastating for Toronto?
I mean, it depends on who they bring in. I don't know that Toronto is going to be as freewheeling with the cash as they have been in the last 4 or 5 years, but if they bring in another high-impact player to replace Giovinco, who last year I think struggled a little bit, we'll see. I mean, at this point, you make the sale and you move on. That's kind of the way world soccer works. So, depending on who Toronto replaces him with, we'll see. I mean, TFC went into Champions League last year, and I think getting to that final took a lot out of them, and they never quite rebounded. They had a bunch of injuries as well, so we'll see. Jury's out on TFC and the Giovinco.
We'll see. All right, we got a zillion questions we got to get back into from the comments. SAI, loanee players going down to USL teams like Indy and Tulsa have never been stable during their loan. Seems like loaned players get loaned, then come back to the first team days after. Why is that?
Well, last year they had depth issues, had guys injured, so they didn't really have the players to loan. That's that's a problem when you've got affiliates and you don't have playing time for young guys because they've got to stay with the first team just to get the full sight out there in training. So I think at some point I would like to see MLS enforce that all of their teams have USL affiliates, or at least a full second division side, just for that reason, to have players that you can call on if you need to fill out your roster, if you can have trouble filling out a practice side. I think it's something the Fire will reconsider here at some point in the near future, but yeah, it's getting guys on loan and then not playing them is a problem.
Is that what happened with Baquero?
Baquero just wasn't very good.
Wasn't very good, you don't think?
Don't tell Jiggly that.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that was part of the problem. He did very well in his first few weeks in camp last year, and they just didn't perform. I know he had some chances, and he wasn't actually played in the position that he was familiar with every time he got a chance to play. But you've got to take advantage of it while you've got him, and he wasn't very good either when he got the chance.
Del Greco questions, James? Ask it?
Well, yeah, that's at the bottom of the list. Any updates on the so-called brand refresh?
No, I haven't heard a lot about the brand refresh, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what their marketing plan is for this year, and I don't know that they've gotten too far along with the brand refresh because they just announced Motorola as the jersey sponsor. So getting the jersey sponsorship done and getting Motorola on as one of the primary sponsors may play a little bit of a part in setting that back just a little bit. But I'm not sure exactly what their intentions are with the brand refresh.
Dago commenting about having to come back from Spain to the fields of Chicago to their playing field. I don't know, but his real question was, any idea of who the two center backs that Nelson was referring to? Any news on these or other potential signings?
As far as I understand, they were hoping to get at least one of those guys done by the end of January, depending on what happened with different moves in the European transfer window. So I believe that the two that Nelson was referring to are going to be difficult to get at this point. I'm not sure if one of those was Moreno or not, because there was some serious interest in him this past summer. Mm-hmm. They rekindled that this winter, but I don't know how they would get that done with their DP and discretionary TAM sort of tied up. The other center back, I believe, was a Serbian center back, but
Milos Kosanovic, someone posted.
That may be. But yeah, I think with the window closed, it's going to be harder to get some of those bigger guys done because the teams that sell them are going to have to replace them with someone. And that's not to say they won't get something done. It's just maybe a little harder now.
I want to jump in here.
Sorry,
James.
Jeffrey.
Everyone's asking for it. Guillermo, what the heck was going on with that Del Greco signing?
I think they took a flyer on a guy who was inexpensive, and he was not very good.
All right, fair enough.
Other than Georgie, who do you think the most promising players are on the Fire at current?
On the first team roster, I like what Brent Bronico did last year as sort of that swing midfielder when they needed a sort of a playmaker.
What do you think about Campos?
I like Campos, Diego Campos, but not so much as a right back, but more of as a midfielder.
Well, who starts, him or Christian Martinez?
Either.
I would. Yeah, I don't think either one's a right back, but
no, for like a winger.
Neither.
Well, I don't think either one of them. I don't think either one of them will be a starter as a winger.
Probably backup wingers, I was thinking.
Yeah, I think both of those guys are nice MLS squad players. I don't know that either one of them is going to be a star. I think Diego Campos has got a place as a squad player, but he's shown that he can help them on set pieces. He's shown he's versatile enough to play right back in a pinch. So he's got room on the roster. He's got a place on the roster. I just don't know if it's a starter.
Do you think the Fire are going after anyone of note at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's always conversations, but I don't know that there's anything close to anything, at least for anyone of note at this point.
Jiggly says, don't speak his name. We're talking about. Also says, Georgie's dad is a big deal.
Yeah, Georgie's dad is big in the Chicagoland soccer scene.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he ran a successful academy up north, and he is. You'll see him around to SeatGeek Stadium every now and then. Georgie's dad is a big guy. He's a big shooter in Illinois soccer.
That's awesome. Are buyback clauses a thing in MLS?
Are buyback clauses a thing in MLS?
Yeah, I guess maybe a player getting sold from Salah getting sold to somewhere and then getting a buyback clause from Chelsea or something like that.
I've seen sell-on clauses. I don't know that anything has been ever substantial, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would trigger a buyback clause.
Maybe the closest they got are those rights claiming issues.
Yeah, I would love to see that go away.
Yeah. Dago says, ask Donald's question. I did. Are there going to be any 76ers processed jerseys being brought this year? What? What? Are there going to be any 76ers processed jerseys bought this year?
Oh, the process. That was their phrase.
Oh, the process.
Was the Sixers. I got a question while I got Guillermo here. Guillermo, so everyone's really excited about this new attacking six. But I want to talk about really the two biggest additions. Do you think Frankowski and Marcelo are going to be big additions this year?
Marcelo's got the resume to be a big addition. We haven't seen him play yet. Same thing with Frankowski. He's a guy that is a younger player, which is a good thing, that they've gone after a player who's up and coming and has a future ahead of him, is on his national team's radar. Again, we haven't seen a whole lot of them, so it's difficult to say just how good either one of those guys are going to be. We're going to have to wait until we see them in person to really develop much of an opinion on them. But they've scouted them and they've looked at them in person. They've seen a lot more of them than we have. So I think we've got their evaluation to go off at this point, and that's pretty much what we got.
What did you think of the ultimate snub by the Fire by Michael Harrington in his retirement address?
I haven't put a whole lot of thought into Michael Harrington, to be honest.
No. Marty with the comment, where does Del Greco end up next?
Back in the Argentine third division, I would imagine.
Or yeah, possibly, if he's lucky. Nicole Hack asking, do we know if it's true that Basti requested that Pano play him at center back?
I don't think Basti would have ended up at center back without having some say in it.
Mm-hmm. Has Nelson Rodriguez been active within MLS trade talks? Or I imagine you might not know anything about that, or you might have to keep that hush hush.
No, he's pretty active in talks with the rest of the league, from what I understand.
Don asking a question. I don't know about this one, but who are the worst players in Fire history?
Oh,
jeez. Oh boy.
People love throwing Shakian out there.
He's in the team picture. Let's go with him. I'd have to think about that.
I got a question here for you. what are your thoughts on? I know this is old news now, but what are your thoughts on the departures of Drew Connor, Campbell, and players that probably could have a role on this club, whether that's a sub or a reserve player?
Yeah, Jonathan Campbell in particular, I thought was an odd move, considering that they are so short at center back and don't have a lot of depth back there. I think Jonathan Campbell can be a pretty successful MLS squad player and a spot starter as a center back. Drew Connor is kind of that in-between player where he may not be an MLS player, may be a good USL player, but it's kind of a guy that didn't get a whole lot of a chance or a whole lot of chance to play. He looked okay in some spots. I'm more surprised that Campbell wasn't given a little more consideration than the Connor, to be honest with you.
Are we going to see more out of Lillard this season, or do you not expect him to make the jump?
I would expect Lillard to get a lot of playing time at Indy 11 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very interesting. Let's see. We got a couple shouts for bad players. DePrado, Tiam, Spiteri, Capano, Neri Castillo. Blah, 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 blah. But, we got a good question here from Batista.
Good question with Cap.
From Marco. Did Frankowski oversell himself and MLS when he mentioned that he aims to prove that this league isn't a retirement league?
I don't think that's overselling anything. I think that's accurate. I don't think it is a retirement league anymore.
I agree. I'm going to ask about Kappelhoff here, but real quick, Michael De La Juve, anything that happened there? Did something happen that he took a cheaper deal in the Netherlands?
Yeah, I am not sure. I mean, they wanted to bring De La Juve back, and I think he was a very important player in that locker room. He was a guy who was very vocal. He was a guy that stood up for his teammates on the field. Whenever there was I don't want to say a cheap shot, but if there was ever a little bit of retaliation that had to be had on the field, it was usually De La Juve in the middle of it. I think if you look at some of the development that Mihailovic went through while he was injured and his road to recovery, I think a lot of that you can attribute to De La Juve. They spent a lot of time together, a lot of time rehabbing. At one point, I spoke to Georgie, and as he was closer to returning last summer, and he jokingly referred to De La Juve as his dad. So I think you're going to see that De La Juve is going to be missed on and off the field. It was unfortunate they didn't have him on the field last year, because I thought a lot of what he did in 2017 went underappreciated toward how successful that team was. And they missed him last year. He was pretty good when he came back last year. Same thing with Georgie after the injury. But yeah, I'm not sure why he would take, unless he just wanted to go back home, which is always a possibility. Kind of sad to see De La Juve go. He was a quality guy.
Another Dutch counterpart here question from SAI. What specifically happened with the Cap re-signing? Rumors went around that he didn't want to come back to Chicago, but then re-signs. More money involved? ?
Yeah, I'm not sure what his compensation package is yet. I think Campbell wanted to come back to MLS. I don't know that they had any preference whether it was in Chicago or somewhere within MLS. It sounded like he had some opportunities back home as well. From what I've heard, it seems that he was open to coming back to MLS, wherever it would have been, whether it was Chicago or anywhere else.
Another question. Do you think the Fire will seriously pursue Memo Ochoa? Have you heard any strong comments about it? He will be on the free, like the Fire likes it this summer.
As far as I know, there has been some interest in Memo Ochoa, but I don't know that it's anything more than an investigative inquiry. To me, Memo Ochoa would be a guy that would fit the perfect bill for a goalkeeper coming into MLS, and he would certainly be a good fit here. But I'm not sure how that goes down with now Usted being added as the apparent starting goalkeeper.
Can we ever get Chicharito here, Guillermo?
No.
No? Oh. No.
That's another guy who at some point I believe will be in MLS.
LAFC.
You'll see him in LAFC.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
International slots shortage issue. What's going to happen with that?
No, I asked Nelson about that a couple of weeks ago, and he did not seem concerned about it. I mean, you can always loan out Collier and Adams, and from what I understand, Campos is closer to getting a green card. So that opens up 3 spots. They don't seem real concerned about it. They can always buy another spot if they need to. Ideally, you'd like to see them underneath 11 with the potential to add a few more guys, but it seems like they're not worried about that.
Let's see. The loan affiliates in Michigan and Indy 11. Is there a long-term relationship possibility with those?
I would imagine that possibility exists with Indy, but they've got aspirations of their own. I think at some point that's another clear example of why at some point you have to start thinking about your own fire-controlled USL affiliate, because you don't know if you have long-term viability with these guys.
I have a question here for you, Guillermo. How excited are you for this upcoming season? Because, we talked about the roster on paper. It does look improved. Are you excited for this 2019 season?
Yeah, I'm always excited for soccer. I think that the team will be better than it was last year. Obviously a lot reliant on keeping Bastian Schweinsteiger and Dax McCarty healthy, but these are guys that are now 31, 32, 33 years old. And particularly with Dax, I think the one thing to be worried about is that he didn't play well last year.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh, we're back.
Yeah, he wasn't as effective in stretches last year either. So
we're about to just to make it clear, everybody, we're about to wrap it up here with Guillermo. We're entering maybe the last 10, 15, 20 minutes, the home stretch here, basically. So ask your last few questions if you can right now, and Guillermo, we'll try and rush through this as fast as you can so we can all get going here.
No worries.
But scouting report on Pano. Can Pano be a premier coach?
I already asked that, Jake.
Okay, well, what's his formation? What's his style? What's his tactics we should expect to see?
Yeah, that's we talked about that a little bit earlier. That's a good question. Depending on what they can do with the back line, you have to figure that maybe they play a 3-man back line with wing backs at this point. I think right now we'll see something similar to what we saw in that first game with guys who are a little more attack-minded, and Campos and Edwards sort of playing that outside role because they don't have anybody else. I don't know that Jorge Corrales is a viable starting left back. Is Nico Hassler a starting viable right back? Maybe. There are a lot of questions in the back line, so it's hard to say exactly how they're going to play or what formation they're going to play without seeing what Panovich is trotting out there yet.
Homegrown, Guillermo. I think we just signed a kid named Andre Reynolds.
Yep.
Another one, apologize if I butcher it, Jeremiah Gutjar.
Yep.
Any information on those guys, scouting reports on them?
Reynolds is more of a project, obviously, just coming out of high school. He's a quick left back. He's not a big guy, but he's your prototypical left back. Gutjar is kind of a utility guy. Can play different positions in the midfield. I think he's more of a holding midfielder, but he can play in different positions. I think Indiana, he may have even played out wide a little bit. But again, more of a utility guy.
Did I ask you guys about Memo Ochoa?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
yes.
just making sure. Okay, just catching up with the comments.
Let's finish up these comments.
We'll finish. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. We'll finish up these comments here, and we'll kind of close it down here. Who would you like to see in the Fire pursue within MLS?
Within MLS, well, yeah, I think there are a couple
question
that you'd like to see filled. Rather than an individual player, I think they've got to find sort of that central playmaker. They've got to get some outside backs, and central playmakers aren't plentiful in MLS, so it's not like you go out and trade a draft pick for for a center playmaker within the league. If you're going to find one of those, chances are it's going to come from outside of the league.
And then when you get one, you hold on to them, like over in Columbus, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Since the front office gets a lot of backlash, have you seen any movement with the front office representatives?
Have I seen any movement
with front office representatives?
Yeah, I mean, they brought some new people in, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what the questions look like.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. What do the coaching staff see in Collier?
A big body.
Yes, that's true. Height.
And actually, the first couple of games last year, he didn't do badly. I think as he started to get a little more playing time, started to kind of be exposed as a his limits started to be exposed. So, again, another guy who can probably use some developmental time in USL.
Okay, I got a question here for you, Guillermo, from the chat. With the signing of I think it's Usted, it seems like the goalkeeper. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Let me restart this. With the signing of Usted, it seems like the goalkeeper deal NR mentioned is off, or are they still pursuing another goalkeeper?
No, I think Usted is going to be their starter. I don't know that they're looking at anybody else right now, but. Yeah, Usted had a difficult end to his time at Vancouver. Struggled a little bit last year at DC until Hamid came back. So he's got to prove himself a little bit. But again, he's got a resume that would suggest he's a competent MLS goalkeeper. I know he looked a little bit shaky last year in DC, but Usted will be an improvement over Richard Sanchez, who honestly I thought would be better than he was last year.
Marco Bautista, any updates on Free 101 and Sector Latinos Section 8, new SL section, and away supporters section?
I am not sure what's going on there.
Okay. Who knows?
Going to 2020, with Nico apparently on his way out, do you think the Fire try to develop Herbers or Collier, or go for someone else big? Torres.
Well, I don't think either one of those guys is capable of replacing Nikolic straight up. I think Herbers would be a decent fill-in player. Nikolic is on a contract year, so he will have some incentive to, play himself into renewal. But strikers who can turn over goals at the rate that he does are very hard to find. That's the hardest thing to do in soccer is score, and he has figured out a way to do it, even if he's not particularly flashy. It's going to be difficult to replace that sort of production.
Any idea about what's happening with Mauricio Pineda?
He's got another year left of college at UNC, so I would imagine that next year they will make an effort to sign Pineda as homegrown.
All right. I think Jeffrey had a little Ask Me Anything, and that's pretty much the last bit of it that we'll do here, folks. Just to see. Merch Bobo wants to know, is he a good boy?
Merch Bobo is the man, or the dog, as you would say.
He's the dog.
Crystal Ball Time from Joshua. Crystal Ball Time, give the most plausible starting 11, and assuming they stay healthy, where does this team finish this year?
I think you saw the most plausible starting 11 in that first game last week. If you insert Mihailovic over Bronico and maybe Hassler on the right side, you see it's not too hard to envision that as the opening day 11. I think if they stay healthy, if Schweinsteiger and McCarty are as good as they were in 2017, they're a team that can compete for the playoff spots. Now that I think they continue to add more playoff spots, but I think they'll compete. I'm still not particularly sold that it's a surefire playoff team, but I think they will be competitive. I don't think they will be as bad as they were last year.
Wait, did you say that MLS has 7 playoff spots now per side?
Yeah, that's right.
So now 7 teams make the playoffs, and also there's a condensed schedule. So isn't that not true too?
Yes.
And then we had the polar vortex we had to deal with this last week, and hopefully that doesn't play into too many home games for the Fire.
Yeah, hopefully it's not minus 20 in March when they start.
Assuming that Cap and Marcelo are our starting center backs, are you concerned that our back line is sub 6 foot?
Yes, I think that.
And slow.
Yes, that is an issue. I think their inability to find success on either end of the field on set pieces has been is directly correlated to their lack of height in some cases. Yeah, I think that is a concern. You've got 2 center backs who are both under 6 foot. Neither one is particularly fast, and I think that's one of the issues why you can't play Bastian Schweinsteiger at center back. He's just not fast enough anymore to play center back in MLS. So that may be why Rodriguez is still looking for center backs.
And maybe Pano's thinking, if I just score more goals than the other team, I won't have to worry about it.
Well, 5-4 every game will draw some interest.
That's for sure. I've watched a ton of Jagiellonia videos. Frankowski seems okay, but not spectacular. I feel that their 10 would have been a better acquisition. What is your take on Frankowski? Is he what the offense needs, or will pushing Basti forward have more effect?
Well, Frankowski's a true winger, which they really haven't had. Even David Akam, when he was playing on the ring, wasn't a true winger. They haven't had a guy, even Katai outside isn't a true winger. They haven't had a guy who's been a true two-way winger for a while. I think having another competent player outside will at least hopefully draw Basti a little bit forward. I think he should be a good fit in the offense. He'll be able to flip sides with Katai and create some unpredictability there. We'll see. I want to see what a trio of Katai, Frankowski, and Mihailovic looks like behind Nikolic when they get going again here in another week or so. I think they've got a game on Wednesday, but I don't think Georgie is going to be. I think he's in Spain, but I don't think they expect him to play Wednesday. So,
Guillermo, what was
Go ahead.
what was going on last year with Katai and Paunovic when he was kind of in that doghouse? I think it's right when he joined the team. And is Katai and Pauno, is their relationship, is it mended, or is this a row? And what's going to happen, going forward this year with that relationship?
Yeah, it seems to be okay now. I think he just didn't like the way he was playing defensively for good reason. Katai, I think, got a little bit tired toward the end of last year.
I see that.
He got paid, so he's going to be expected to perform like he did towards the middle of last summer when he got them almost single-handedly above the red line. So, he's going to have to earn his keep.
Do you think he matches up well with Nico, his style of play?
Well, that's kind of one of the things that's puzzling and needs to be answered is that style of play. I'm not sure that they all match up exactly as good complements to each other, but we'll see. Now they've revamped that a little bit with Frankowski, and we've got to see what his skill set is and how he meshes with the other guys. That's why I would still like to see a real number 10 in there at some point, just to sort of act as a facilitator with these guys who aren't particularly good at getting the ball to each other. So I don't know. We'll see. We've got to see how they all play together in person.
All right. When's Messi Ronaldo coming? Being announced? I'm just kidding. Guillermo, if you could bring back one former Fire player in their prime that would instantly make this team better, who is it?
In their prime, well, just because it's easy to say, let's go with Peter Novak or Cuauhtemoc Blanco.
Oh, I like Blanco. I thought he's president. I thought he's a mayor down in Mexico.
Yeah. There's he's I believe he may have.
I think he got booted out. I remember reading an article where he got in some trouble or something.
No, I think he's still in office.
Okay. Hey.
Oh, snap. All right. The last question is from Jiggly. This is the last question of the stream. By the way, Jiggly, he asked if we're too good for him. Now, no, absolutely not. We'll have Jiggly on again, of course. But odds on a complete sale this season, he's wondering. What's the possibility of a 5-man back line? We kind of talked about that. That we think it's a good possibility. If not Nelson, who do you think would take the GM in Chicago? The GM job in Chicago if it suddenly became available? I'll shout out Ronaldo.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. The sale's not going to happen. I don't think Ronaldo's going to be a GM. Not with this organization, at least. 5-man back line is definitely possible given their personnel and the lack of depth right now along that back line. We'll see. I think Nelson has acknowledged that if they don't win, that he's going to be on the hot seat, and he will be the first guy that to occupy the hot seat if they have another bad year.
Oh, you think Pano? You think Pano's on the hot seat?
Well, Nelson and Pano.
Yeah,
their fates are sort of tied together as a tandem. And now that they're back with matching contract lengths, and the pressure's on.
All right.
I gotta get going here, guys. Guillermo, I just want to say thank you for everything, coming on the show, and just thank you for all your writing and what you're doing on The Athletic. Like James says, it is so worth the subscription. Not only reading what you put, but what everyone on The Athletic puts on there. So just thank you so much for coming on, and this has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you guys. I thought it was fun.
It was a blast, Guillermo. Jiggly needs to know most underrated rapper in Chicago.
I'm more of an old school rap fan. I'm not a big fan of the new wave of the rap guys. So underrated rappers as part of this new wave, I'm not a fan of any. Take that, Jiggly.
Well, all right, everybody, boys and girls, thanks for joining us on this live edition of this usual live edition of Spitting Fire podcast with this time with Guillermo. Smash that like button to show some appreciation for Guillermo taking the time to come on. Hopefully we can get him on again here in the future as the season goes on. It's going to be a long season. So, yeah, that's about it for us. Fired up footballers, and we'll see you guys later. Guillermo, I guess real quick, last thoughts.
Fired up footballers.
All right, boys and girls, you heard it here. We'll see you guys later. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Guillermo.
All right, guys.
Adios.
Adios.
Good night, guys.